Hey guys, Argent here with a brief political history of modern Hungary. This is a request, but I was going to do it anyways. Hungary is pretty much the most based country in Europe at the moment. Poland's a close second, and Denmark is gradually getting there. But Hungary is just so based, it's insane. Hungary is pretty much modern Hungary. Is pretty much everything we on the alt right would want in a modern government, and that's largely due to Viktor Orban and Fidesz. But we'll get to that in a minute. Um, we're just going to look briefly at the at Hungary, and we'll get to Viktor Orban in a minute. So in the aftermath, so Hungary during communism was the least repressive of the Eastern European communist states, and the most open to reform, etc. This is partially because you may know about the 1956 Hungarian Revolution, in which they briefly threw out the communist government before the Soviet Union came in and mercilessly crushed the Hungarian Revolution. But during that time, they killed most of the KGB agents who had been operating in Hungary and tried to restore self-rule to Hungary, essentially. After that, while communism was reinstated, the government was more laid back, permitted a bit more political freedom and a bit more economic freedom versus the other Eastern Bloc countries. In part out of fear of such a thing happening again. Hungary was one of the first countries to dismantle its totalitarian system when the countries were gradually collapsing in Eastern Europe. Largely because the communist government thought that because they were so moderate compared to the other ones, that they could legitimately win a democratic election. So that brings us to the election of 1990, the first parliamentary election held in Hungary after the fall of communism. So this election was overwhelmingly won by the right, by the Hungarian Democratic Forum, which would eventually merge with Fidesz, and we'll get into Fidesz in a minute, and the Alliance of Free Democrats, which were a liberal party, and then we had another conservative party, the Hungarian Socialist Party, which was the successor to the Communist Party. It was founded in 1989 by the reform wing of the ruling Communist Party. So that is the main left-wing party in Hungary, which was founded, as many Eastern European communist parties were, by the Communist Party just transitioning into being a social democrat party. That happened in Russia, although the Communist Party in Russia is simultaneously more left and right-winged than most successor parties. It's much more nationalistic and socially conservative, but more economically socialist. Generally speaking, though, communist parties in Eastern Europe just transitioned into being normal social democratic or normal democratic socialist parties, depending on the country. So the right largely won this election. We see the first appearance of Fidesz, and we'll talk about Fidesz a bit more at the moment, but we see a pretty big mixture, with the right, generally speaking, winning a much larger share of the vote, with some kind of centrist liberals and the socialists being completely and utterly devastated. Then we head into the Hungarian election of 1994, in which the Hungarian Socialist Party is able to briefly win a huge majority of the seats in Parliament. We see the Liberals making a pretty big gain, and the right losing most of their seats. Once again, I'm just rushing through this to get to more modern, because as with most Eastern European countries, it's very chaotic in the post-war era. So, in 1998, we have the first victory of Fidesz. And this is where we'll really start talking about Viktor Orban. So the Hungarian party, Hungarian Socialist Party, lost a lot of its support, and a coalition of Fidesz, the Hungarian Democratic Forum, the Independent Smallholders Party, the Alliance of Free Democrats, the Christian Democrat, just all the right-wing parties entered into a coalition and succeeded in removing the Hungarian Socialist Party from power. So this is probably a good point in time to talk about Fidesz, which is the dominant force in post-communist politics in Hungary. So Fidesz is a right-wing populist, national conservative, Eurosceptic, Christian democratic, socially conservative party. In other words, it's just awesome. So it's largely a national conservative party. It's very much dedicated to Christianity, though, and just kind of Hungarian nationalism. But it's kind of there's kind of a difference between being far right and being radical right. Fidesz is fairly far right, but it's not really radical. It's not really. I've never really seen anything fascistic or revolutionary about it. It's more of kind of like a traditionalist conservative party that's just very right wing. So Fidesz initially started off as being a liberal party, kind of a center-right liberal party. Viktor Orban kind of started off as a libertarian, anti-communist. Over time, though, what tended to happen was in subsequent elections, what was the one we were looking at? No. Like this election, you can see a lot of the formerly large Hungarian right-wing parties are declining. And most of their membership defected to Fidesz, and Fidesz kind of became a nexus for all the right and the center-right and further right in Hungary in the post-war period. So as they went into Fidesz, the left and kind of liberal wings of Fidesz tended to bleed out towards other parties, and Fidesz became largely dominated by social and conservatives and Hungarian nationalists, and became progressively right-winged. Fidesz used to be a member of Liberal International, but eventually left that and joined International Democrat and Centrist Democrat Union. It is still a member of the European People's Party. Why exactly, I'm not really sure. I think it's just to be part of the game to try and avoid the EU shutting them down. So Fidesz is a national conservative party favoring interventionist parties on economic issues. Okay, that's really weird. Social democratic on social issues. Anyways, so Fidesz tends to be interventionist on economics, but very right-wing on social issues and national identity issues. Fidesz is building a border fence, for instance. It adopted a new constitution, which I'll talk about once we get to that. It's openly ethno-nationalist. It's openly declaring Christianity to be the traditional religion of Hungary, etc. It's pursuing natalist policies, seeking the preservation of the Hungarian ethnicity, defining marriage as between one man and one woman, and fighting against abortion. So yeah, interestingly, in Hungary, the left tends to be more free market and the right tends to be more economically restrictive, which is probably due to the EU in general being more free market, and social liberalism tends to come in the form of free market policies. So a lot of the further right in Europe tend to be more economically protectionist to try and protect their countries from kind of American degeneracy. But anyways, so we have the election of 1998 where Viktor Orban briefly wins. Let's see. Hungarian Justice and Life Party. So brief victory for Fidesz. Then the socialists managed to regain power by having a coalition with the Liberal Party. So this is around the time when we have the Hungarian election of 2006, and this is where everything changes in Hungary, and Hungary swings right, quite dramatically to the left. Right. By this point in time, Fidesz has succeeded in annexing the majority of the other right-wing parties and has become, as you can see, the main opposition to the left. It's gradually annexed all the various different left-wing parties, all the different center-right and further right parties, and is now the largest political force in Hungary. However, due to a couple different things. The Hungarian socialists succeeded in winning re-election. This would be the last time they'll be relevant. So what happened is they won re-election, but what came out immediately following the election is that they had massively lied about their economic performance over the previous 4 years. Because as we go back, they won the previous election and governed from 2002 to 2006. So then they massively lied about the economic performance. There was massive corruption, vote fraud, etc. Basically, they had left the country a complete disaster and used control over the state media to lie to the people about it. So we had a massive wave of riots and protests throughout Hungary demanding their resignation. And this mainly came from a speech that the socialist prime minister made. So let's see here. This is within regards to lying to the people. There is not much choice, there is not, because we screwed up. Not a little, a lot. No European country has done something as boneheaded as we have. Evidently, we lied through the last year and a half, 2 years. It was totally clear that what we were saying is not true. You cannot quote any significant government measure we can be proud of, other than at the end we managed to bring the government back from the brink. Nothing. If we have to give account to the country about what we did for 4 years, then what can we say? So he also said things that can be interpreted as having called for clandestine media and private international finance support. Let's see here. So this led to massive riots, which and eventually brought down the government, which led to the Hungarian election of 2010, in which Fidesz won the largest electoral victory in Hungarian history. By this time, they have fully annexed all the other right-wing parties, except for Jobbik, but we'll get to Jobbik in a minute. And they won an absolute 2/3 majority, which enabled them to make a new constitution for Hungary. And we'll talk about the new constitution for Hungary. So in 2011, Hungary passed a new constitution. The Hungarian constitution of 2011 included such tidbits as: we are proud that our King Saint Stephen established the Hungarian state on firm foundations 1,000 years ago, and our country is a part of Christian Europe. We recognize the role of Christianity in preserving our nationhood. I mean, that's good. That's how it opens. It literally says the crown of Saint Stephen. Hungary is a Christian nation. We are proud of our forefathers who struggled for freedom, for survival, freedom, and independence for our country. We are proud that our people have battled for centuries to protect Europe and have, with their talents and diligence, enriched her common values. I mean, if that's not like the most LARPy thing possible in an awesome way. Well, Hungary did. I mean, Hungary was kind of the bastion against the Ottomans and the Mongolians. They've been invaded many times. We profess that the most important... we undertake to preserve and nurture our legacy, the Hungarian culture, our unique language, the man-made and natural treasures of the Carpathian Basin. So once again saying the duty of the nation is the preservation of the people and the culture of the nation and their betterment, which is 100% what I believe. We profess that the most important framework for our coexistence are the family and the nation. There we go. I clap my hands to you. That's the most basic I've ever heard. Of course, yes, the nuclear family is the basis of civilization, and so is national identity. Excellent. We respect the achievements of our historic constitution, the Holy Crown, which embodies the continuity of the Hungarian constitutional state and the unity of the nation. Let's see here. We do not accept the communist constitution, etc. So it just goes on to talk about, I think it includes pro-life laws. It defines marriages between one man and one woman. So it is a right-wing Christian nationalist constitution, and it's basically awesome. So let's see here. So it includes parental duties towards children and children's duties towards elderly parents, the responsibility before God of the members of parliament, the ethnic basis of the nation with regards to the safeguards for the respect of minorities that were there prior to the Constitution, refuting the idea that a nation is defined by political ideology, the prohibition of eugenics, the definition of marriage between one man and one woman, and Christianity as being the basic religion of the Hungarian people. So in other words, the most red-pilled country in Europe. Now as for Viktor Orban himself, he is a stone-cold badass. He has 5 children, which is pretty awesome. He is a Calvinist, actually. He grew up without formal religion, but he kind of rediscovered it during a lot of study during the 1990s, as now he's very serious about his faith. His wife is Catholic and very devoted as well, which kind of, as some people have noted, is kind of like a political marriage trying to unite the two different things. Hungary is mainly Catholic, but it has a large Calvinist and Protestant minority. So, Viktor Orban has said that Hungary has abandoned Christian values, and that a return of Europe must return to Christian values to spiritually and economically regenerate itself. Behind every successful economy, Orban said, there is some kind of spiritual driving force. So I'm just going to read this. The European crisis, he said, has not come by chance, but by the carelessness and neglect of their responsibilities by leaders who have questioned precisely those Christian roots. This is the driving force that allowed European cohesion, family work, and credit. These values were the old continental economic power, thanks mainly to the development which was done in accordance with these principles. So basically, he said that Europe has abandoned its Christian roots, it's abandoned its spiritual and cultural core, and it must return to that. Viktor Orban also said Europe must be preserved for Europeans and Hungary for Hungarians. So I mean, like, what else could you ask for? Viktor Orban is like the most based modern politician, and Fidesz is just awesome. So, we're heading into the next election. Let's see here. What was I looking at? No, where's the Hungarian election? There we go. Then we head into the Hungarian election of 2014, which is basically where we are at present. Fidesz lost a couple seats. It still maintained a very solid, respectable majority. But it lost the 2/3 majority it needs to unilaterally change the constitution. All the left-wing parties and centrist parties formed an alliance, but they barely managed to get a quarter of the votes. The main emerging force in Hungarian politics is Jobbik, which is a radical far-right party. I don't really like them, because I don't really understand why Hungary needs a radical party. Fidesz seems to be doing pretty much everything that we could have asked for, without any of like the kind of like jackbooted, police state, thuggish, neo-Nazi, clownish stuff. So I think Fidesz is doing a pretty good job. I think they should just let them run the country. Fidesz is also in alliance with the Christian Democrats, who are just some other random party that happens to be popular in a couple parts of Canada. A couple parts of Hungary. It's basically just kind of like a satellite party of Fidesz. So we have Jobbik, or the Movement for a Better Hungary. So it is Hungarian nationalism, radicalism, Turanism. Turanism's the fucking weirdest political ideology ever. Basically, it's the idea that Hungary isn't European, but it's actually Turkish, and that Hungary should seek closer ties with other Turkish countries. Why you would want to be tied to other Turkish countries, I don't know, because most of them are pretty shitty, or Muslim. But yeah, they like Turanism. It's fucking weird. And they have a paramilitary rig, which is kind of awesome. The Magyar Garda. So they are Hungarian nationalism, Turanism, Irredentism, because they want to retake Transylvania and some other Hungarian regions outside of Hungary. Euroscepticism, anti-immigration, anti-globalism, anti-Zionism. Anti-Zionism always makes me smile. So Hungary is kind of is a third position party It's basically a fascist party. Um, as I said, I would normally be sympathetic towards a far right fascist party, but in Hungary it's completely unnecessary. It is a good sign though, because Jobbik gets virtually the same number, gets very similar number of votes to the left. So the left really doesn't have much influence in modern Hungary. The right gets about 3/4 of the vote between them, and that basically ensures that there will not be a left wing government anytime in the near future. Fidesz has passed legislation to make it easier for them to continue in majority. I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm glad that Hungary is a dominant party system in which Fidesz will realistically win most elections for the foreseeable future. I think they're doing one hell of a job. I think they're fixing a lot of modernity's problems and kind of making a better version of modernity. They're building a border fence, so hopefully Hungary will survive. And hopefully they'll stand as a beacon and an example of what we can actually accomplish through electoral victories without widespread societal violence and destruction. So that's a brief political history of modern Hungary, the most red pill based country in Europe. This is Argent Templar signing out.